But anyway, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but probably not. Time for a good game. Time for a good game. Not a fan of spell strive at all, really. I feel like if they're not going to teach you what you need in the Force tutorial, why even force a tutorial to begin with? Either send me in totally blind or have me do all the actual how to play things, because the game makes little sense. Stuff is written weird. Whatever. I think it's rude. It's maybe poorly written. I brought Willard's son. Look at that face. Right, so where we were last time is we've been granted an audience with Kinzo. Willhead. Kinzo and Genji could be seen in the VIP room. Kinzo was sitting back in a chair, his eyes closed as though in a troubled sleep. Master, the guest has come to see you. Kinzo slowly opened his eyes. Yep. Thank you. For the reminder. There we go, okay. MatPat is of course here in Time Frozen Hakenjima. Because he is part of the game. Literally. Part of Beatrice's game. Kinzo slowly opened his eyes. Those eyes were red from crying. They regained their focus and slowly fell in will. You don't forget, we're at Beatrice's funeral. Whatever that really means. I am Ushimiya Kinzo. Will. I'm Willard. Allow me to express my condolences. So, you came here to attend Beatrice's funeral. Just who are you? I'm no one. I have no connections with anyone. Don't think too deeply about it. You'll just get a headache. Ow. I ask that you choose your words a little more carefully. Audible smile. What a strange guest. So, what business do you have with me? I want to ask about Beatrice. What? Kinzo's gaze grew sharp. Leon felt a bit lightheaded and wondered why this guy had to be so direct. Why do you ask? You're no one, aren't you? Why do you want to know about Beatrice? What is your purpose? Because I'm no one. I can listen to your tale impartially and record it. You'll probably leave this world before too long. If you die without telling anyone anything about Beatrice, your children will adorn Beatrice with whatever tale they please, writing that into their memories. You entertain me, boy. You plan on writing my will for me? But that is none of your business. Beatrice is mine alone. No matter what other people say, no one can defile our tale. What they say is of no consequence. No matter how Kraus and the others misconstrue it, it will be neither painful nor vexing to me. Willard-sama, the master is not fond of wills. He is not the sort of man who would abandon a task, so that it might be performed after his life ends. Probably true. I thought it sounded a bit unlike you. The ability to struggle on as long as we have life is what makes us human. You think I would give up so soon and leave behind a will? How laughably absurd. Yes, that does sound a bit more like you. It's not your style to ask someone to write about the past, just because you think your death is drawing nearer. We know how deeply you loved Beatrice-sama. You are the model most worthy of respect that any must know, and an example for us to follow in every aspect of our games? Lives. That's what I get for looking at chat at the same time. Ugh. Please guide our wandering souls and tell us just how much you loved her grandfather. How were you able to live through everything you faced because of her love? I only ask for you to guide us by showing us that love's strength. You're pretty good at this. It's your fault for being so tactless. Boy, what do you know of Beatrice? Boy, do you want some hot dogs? A truly ignorant person wouldn't even be interested in learning more. The mere fact that you know Beatrice's name shows that you were neither ignorant nor unconnected. Good point. The Beatrice I know of is the woman you loved, the one you met before the mansion on Hakenjima was even built. However, she probably departed from this world, leaving behind a daughter. And that's the girl who was raised in Kuodorian. Oh-ho. Willard-sama, there's no building known as Kuodorian on Hakenjima. That name, Kuodorian, you mentioned it when we were talking with Aunt Rosa, too. What in the world does it mean? You should have an idea by now. It's the name of the hidden mansion deep in the forest where his mistress's daughter lived. Interesting. So you actually know the name of Kuodorian. Continue. You sparked my interest. Kinzo shrugged and grinned. Everyone here is kind of like tweaked a bit to be more amicable with Will. I think that's something that Bernkastel set up. The one living in Kuadorian was probably Beatrice's daughter. However, it seems that you, at least, didn't think of her that way. Oh, then how did I think of her? When Ushid and Rosa went to Kuadorian, Beatrice told her a little about herself. In that conversation, she referred to you as Kinzo. It was the same when she spoke to you directly. Though she said that she thought of you as a father, she didn't call you father. She either chose not to call you that, or she wasn't allowed to call you that. That could only mean one thing. And what might that be? Reincarnation. You didn't think of your daughter as a child Beatrice left behind. You believed that the dead Beatrice had revived into a new body. Genji, once in the past, you spoke in front of Natsu and several other family members, stating that there was never a child between Kinzo and Beatrice. I have no memory of saying this. Of course, this game's Genji probably wouldn't remember that. However, near the end of the first game, when the survivors had all gathered in Kinzo's study, Genji was asked whether Kinzo and Beatrice ever had a child together, and he denied it, saying, "I have not heard of anything like that." That may have been a lie, but in a way, it was a model answer for one of Kinzo's confidants. After all, in Kinzo's eyes, she wasn't a daughter, but Beatrice reborn. Will, I don't know what you're talking about, but I will not let you slander the family head. This isn't slander, it's reasoning. However, I understand the heart. In your eyes, Beatrice was the woman you loved most. She remained that way even after death, for eternity, without fading in the slightest. I doubt you thought of her as Beatrice reborn at the moment of her birth. However, it wouldn't be strange if you slowly began to wonder whether that child, whose blue eyes and beautiful blonde hair reminded you of a younger Beatrice, might actually be Beatrice reborn. Master, shall I? Shall I drag this rude child out? Genji asked Kinzo. For a while, Kinzo hung his head in silence, as though remembering something from his own past. Your daughter grew to be beautiful, and nearly identical to her mother. You must have been ecstatic. However, I doubt you'd be completely satisfied by that alone. After all, though she was Beatrice reborn to you, she didn't think of herself that way. How can you know that? Whenever she was called Beatrice, she got this feeling she couldn't shake away, a feeling like something was out of place. People never feel anything out of place about the name they're given at the time of their birth. However, she did have that feeling. That must mean she was aware that the name Beatrice wasn't hers. In Guadorian, she asked both Kinzo and Rosa about who she was. Who am I? Everyone calls me Beatrice. And that does indeed seem to be the name of a great witch, as you say. But that isn't me. I cannot use any magic. I simply have the soul of that witch sealed inside my body. But Kinzo, at this child, totally gaslit her into thinking she was her own mother, essentially. Her memory would have returned eventually. She must truly have been Beatrice reborn. Her memory was coming back bit by bit. My magical ceremonies were helping her regain her memories one little bit at a time. Head-sama. There's no need to be surprised. If you line up the information in all the games so far, this is the obvious answer you get. The high-level Beatrice talked about this. By metaphor, she said that Kinzo refused to let the witch's soul escape after death, and instead caught it and locked it up in a body of flesh. When he says high-level Beatrice, he means like meta-Beatrice, like the Beatrice that talks with Battler in the imaginary tea room. She also said that her power and memory had been sealed. If you match that interpretation of hers to this theory, it all makes sense. Willard-sama, thanks to powerful magic ceremonies, the master gained a reborn child of the dead Beatrice-sama. That cannot be denied. I won't deny this, Stork, and I don't intend to doubt the depths of Kinzo's love for this woman called Beatrice. How a man shows his affection for a child, who's the only living reminder of her mother, is no one's business. If she grew to look more and more like Beatrice, and Kinzo's love gave rise to a new special emotion, I find that a very human reaction. You think you can understand my love? I'm not qualified to understand it. However, I'm also not qualified to deny it. Oh, Beatrice, please forgive me. Kinzo sobbed quietly for a while, wiping away his tears. Because of love, he believed she was Beatrice reborn, and raised her that way. However, somewhere in his heart, he might have felt pangs of conscience, telling him that he might be forcing his emotions on someone who wasn't really Beatrice. Then, the Beatrice of Kuvatorian had an unexpected guest, Rosa. That woman simply couldn't believe that she was the Beatrice Kinzo desired. She couldn't stand the fact that she didn't understand who she was, and she wanted to escape to the outside world. So I guess that means they were half-siblings, huh? Kinzo's kids. Kinzo had too many kids. And then bad luck happened. Then she fell from the cliff and died. Genji handled that death, which couldn't become public knowledge, very quietly. Funerals aren't for the dead. They exist so that those who are alive can sever their ties with the dead. You could never do that. That's why it festered within you. Beatrice. Oh, great-grandfather. You lost your mistress's daughter. No, you lost Beatrice twice. Unable to let that sorrow show on the outside, you kept it locked up in your heart. And it eventually festered and turned to madness. That's what spurred on your abnormally strong interest in the occult in your later years. Oh, Beatrice, Beatrice. Why? Why did you leave me twice? Your smile, that beautiful hair, those eyes. Why did you die in my arms not once but twice? Not literally in his arms, I think she was long dead by the time he would have gotten there, but... Is that how much you... Oh... By now, Kinzo wasn't even trying to suppress his sobs. He sometimes scratched at his head in anguish, sometimes faced the heavens like an opera singer. Kinzo yelled over and over again, repeating Beatrice's name. But just what Beatrice are we having a funeral for today? That's a complicated question. At that moment, there was a quiet sound of a door closing. When they turned around, she was already there. Kumasawa had appeared. If they already know that much, perhaps we can tell them the rest. Oh hey, evening. Thanks for the raid. I finally got back to streaming for the first time in a while. Haha. I exist. What were you up to tonight? I tried Spell Strife. I really didn't like it. It's a mobile game at its core, even though you can play it in browser, so it was not my kind of thing. Yeah, sorry. Have you tried it before? They make you do like a super quick tutorial at the start that doesn't really teach you anything about how to actually play the game. And then they just let you either do more tutorials optionally, or you can just go into the game. And I tried to just go into the game, it doesn't make much sense. Some of the text is weird and poorly written. It's weird. It's a nice looking game too. Super meme version. Yeah, I heard that like there was originally like an older version called something else. Hawkeye something else, I think, as Spell Strive is like the newer one. Because this one only came out a couple years ago. But I don't think it's really for me. Yeah, if some people enjoy it, that's fine, but I don't really want to watch ads to earn coins. Especially in browser. Weird. Cookie. Oh, it had stuff like that. Huh. Though if they know that much, I don't believe there's anything more to tell. No, we should tell them. As a woman, I've always thought that the heart of Kuwadonian's Beatrice is a story that should be told. And now, someone has appeared who is worthy to hear it. Yeah. It sucks. I like single-player card games. And I like roguelikes. I like beating opponents and grinding cards, but I don't really feel the appeal to do it in a mobile game, unfortunately. And the controls also suck because it's got to be a mobile game, so you can't like hover over stuff to see info. You have to click on all the cards and just remember what they do, or go to the trouble of seeing the description every time. I should honestly just be playing Lost Branch. I considered playing Lost Branch tonight. Maybe tomorrow. I believe that now is the time to tell all without holding back. Kumasawa-san, do you know something about Beatrice? Of course she does. In the fourth game, we have testimony from the ferryboat captain saying that Kumasawa went in and out of Kuwadorian. I'd be willing to bet that Kumasawa had different work shifts at the mansion and Kuwadorian. There was a young girl to be taken care of. Kumasawa, with her long experience in taking care of children, must have been of immense value. Yet she isn't allowed to wear the golden eagle on her clothes. I feel like that's kind of ridiculous, considering she had, like, work caring for Beatrice herself. That is correct. You might even call me her wet nurse. No way. I can't believe it. So, everything Will-san is saying is the truth? Yes, it is a fact. A secret mansion was constructed on the opposite side of the island for Beatrice-sama. Kuwadorian's existence is truth. I don't know when Kenzo married his official wife, but at that time, he already had an enormous store of wealth and had bought Aokiji whole. I'll be getting back to HSA sometime soon too. I almost played it today, but I wanted to try Spell Strive, and I figured Umineko would be easier to slot in as like a returning game. So maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. I'm taking a week off from work, so I'll be doing some more streaming for a bit here. He then built 2 mansions and set up 2 separate lives. Kinzo's children had also been aware of Kinzo's clandestine eccentricities at the time. It probably hadn't been easy to maintain 2 separate lives. Moreover, Kinzo's wife had been suspicious and had sniffed around all the time. The master stayed in Quadonia as much as time allowed. He would sometimes pretend to go on a business trip and stay there for several days, treasuring the time he spent with Beatrice-sama. It was not a father-daughter relationship. You could sometimes catch a glimpse of his great love for the dead Beatrice-sama, and it was a heartwarming thing. No, I don't have a work scheduled. No, I didn't say that. I just said that I have work. The way you say it makes it sound like he sometimes treated her as a substitute for the dead Beatrice. Oh, if it sounded that way, my apologies. Beatrice-sama probably accepted her father's love. However, I will not deny that she was sometimes forced to bear love she didn't understand. Kumasawa's tone made it sound as though she was scolding Kinzo, which he very much deserves. As a mother who had raised many kids, Kumasawa had probably spotted that Kinzo's love was sometimes misplaced. Yeah, we actually got to meet one of Kumasawa's children once. In Anji future. However, the more she grew to look like her mother, the more distorted and twisted Kinzo's heart became. Because of his deep love, it grew very, very twisted. And for whatever you like from this, I guess. You were right to scold me, my friend. I understand. My love is eternal and undying. However, I must acknowledge that I poured that affection onto the wrong person. Grandfather. Wait, you don't mean... Leon-sama? All humans in this world are tied to each other. Even if they do not notice, there is always some sort of tie. Those ties wrap themselves around people and bring them together. No way. Grandfather. Just as Kinzo had done, Leon also wiped away tears and stared down at the floor. Apparently, the truth had been too much of a shock for the young successor to handle. She can leave the room if she wants. Master, the time to speak has arrived, has it not? I see. So the time has come, my friend. Unless you tell us, none of the truth will become clear. Master, I believe they may have the qualifications and the right to know. I know. Perhaps on this day of my fickle funeral, Beatrice in heaven has given me a chance to atone. Forgive me for not telling you this before now. After taking a deep breath, Kinzo finally lowered the hands that had been covering his face, and looked at Will and Leon with those red eyes. Grandfather. You listened to Leon. Guessed. Willard, was it? Yeah. I thank you for giving me a chance to speak the truth while I am still able. You must surely be a messenger from heaven sent by Beatrice. You have my gratitude. Beatrice isn't the one you have to thank. It was just a witch. Well, I guess they're both witches. I do not care who it was. I have been given a chance. That is enough. Thank you, Willard. Kinzo slowly stood up and held out his right hand. He was offering to shake hands. It must have been Kinzo's way of expressing his gratitude. Will responded. Then the two hands gripped each other tightly in silence. I think I know what we're going to do now. We're going to have a very special flashback. When they did, a bright light poured out from the gap between the two hands. Bill felt as though something the size of a grain had burned itself into his palm. It was the power that Burn Castell had given him. The light grew brighter and brighter. However, it seemed that Kinzo and the others couldn't see it. Now I will speak. I met Beatrice. Beatrice Castiglione, just before the end of the war. It's the first time that name has come up. I hope I'm saying it right, I'm probably not. Castiglione, I'll say. She came from across the sea. Well, Beatrice is an Italian name. Beatrice, rather, is at least the Italian pronunciation. Look, flashback Kinzo. Definitely not just a lazy edit of Battler. Are you Kinzo? It's how grandfather looked in the past. I've seen photos. Just what on earth? It's the theater-going power that Bernkastel gave me. Don't try to understand. I'll just get a headache. You're getting the hang of this. At one time, Genji told Balor that he looked like Kinzo in his youth. Sure enough, though the young Kinzo wasn't exactly the same as Balor, they looked very similar. Sure. Allow me to introduce myself again. I am Ushimiya Kinzo, grandfather. Even the voice seemed to resemble Balor's somehow, and he also had gray hair, oddly enough. Clearly, Balor had inherited Kinzo's blood more thickly than any other. I had no desire to exceed the Ushimura family headship. My being chosen as the head was nothing more than a prank of fate. In the Great Kanto earthquake, those in charge passed away and you were selected from the branch families. That's correct. After all, grandfather was wise despite his youth, and he already possessed a dignity fitting for the headship. Ridiculous. Those greedy elders kept looking out for their own personal interests and couldn't decide on a new head at all. It was as foolish as arguing about who the new captain should be on a sinking ship. So since you had no connections with anyone in the main family, you were selected right out of the blue. It's all because of my toes. If only I had one less toe in each foot, my life may have turned out quite differently. Umineko wouldn't have happened if Kinzo didn't have polydactyly. In the Ushimura family, polydactyly was seen as a mark of good fortune. After all, many of the great ones in their family history had possessed it. It was all very pathetic. The elders didn't care whom they dragged in as long as it wouldn't benefit any one of them particularly. So they just happened to hear that someone in one of the branch families had 6 toes, and decided that would do well enough. Precisely. The elders didn't care what sort of novice became the next head as long as they could make him their puppet. In fact, the more this person was ignorant of leadership, the better it would be for them. Grandfather. Leon, it is quite different in your case. You will be the one who inherits everything I have. That is the fate you were granted on the day of your birth. That is why I gave you that silver ring and raised you so strictly. You are quite different from me. You are already a splendid successor, of whom no one could be ashamed. Yes, sir. A puppet for a head. I doubt that could have been easy. As he pondered about where to begin, Kinzo laughed bitterly. It would probably bring back painful memories no matter where he started from. It lasted for so long, that span of gray days. That dizzying stretch of time I spent dead, like moss growing on a rock. It became the rope in the tug-of-war between the elders, who thought of nothing but their own profit. And I probably could have snapped at any moment. However, people are far more resilient than one would think. Though I spent so many days as though I'd been killed, I was not killed. So, I was forced to search for death of my own. Before I realized it, I'd reached an age at which the young would laugh at me if I tried to call myself young. That dizzying long stretch of gray was left completely empty. It lasted for a full 20 years. In 20 years, a person can be born, find a purpose, and even become their own man with their own place in the world. In short, if one truly becomes a human only when they have become a working adult, then they spent a period of time long enough to create a human, doing nothing but playing the part of those greedy elders' puppet. Ironically, though that time aged my body, it did not age my mind. My mind alone was still as young as it had been during those rich, happy days before I was summoned to Odawara. And yet, my body alone grew older and older. Eventually, the vast gap between the two reached almost incomprehensible levels. So, I could hardly believe that the worn-out man in the mirror was really me. No, it wasn't really me. The head of the Ushimura family was just a name. It had no power. It didn't require that I have any independence. There was no need for me to get involved with anything. I was just a doll sitting there on the doll rack, gathering dust. I remembered nothing but lazily flipping through Western books I liked, locking myself up inside my own world, doing nothing but playing with roses and drinking terrible drinks. And it lasted a full 20 years. Before I knew it, I suddenly had a wife I did not know. It wasn't any wife I had chosen. It was the daughter of some noble family that the elders had chosen and forced on me for their own reasons. But that did not matter to me. I did not love my wife, but neither did I dislike her. I just didn't care. I fathered a few children, but that wasn't out of love for my wife. They were just born before I knew it. That's all there was to it. None of it mattered. No, that's not quite right. Everything was decided by someone other than me, and I simply obeyed. That was the job of the Ushimura family head. Yes. On some level, I did feel as though I was being slowly and quietly killed. I can't believe it. To think that you, the one who has been praised for being such a bold and wise ruler, lived a life like that for so long. Leon, there is nothing so long and faint as a life you do not live for yourself, and yet it slides on by in the blink of an eye. Do not forget this. Life you live for yourself. Living means having your own will. You probably were dead during that time. Precisely. I wanted to live. No, I wanted to die. How can a puppet die? By cutting the strings? Correct. That would be death, and it would also be life, since it would mean being free. Before I realized it, trouble was brewing in the world. World War II, the Pacific War. Japan had extended the war fronts too far to the east and west, and the tide of war was changing. Thanks to the influence of the elders, I was able to avoid conscription. Of course, this was not out of compassion for me. It was because I was their precious puppet, so the war never really felt that close to me. However, when I personally decided to abandon the protection, it was very easy. At that time, the Ishigami family had almost completely collapsed, and since the elders had apparently gathered enough of the scraps to last them the rest of their lives, they seemed to care little for what I did, now that they no longer had any use for me. So, I realized that I had finally found my time to die. One by one, I cut the threads I was hanging from, and began to search for a place to end my life. So you search for death on the battlefield. I thought that if I was going to die anyway, I should try to be of some use to my country. No, that's a lie. I probably just lacked the willpower to end my own life. War was a suitable excuse for death. I heard that grandfather had knowledge necessary for public work projects and construction, so he was tasked with setting up facilities for the Navy construction team. And what a foolish mistake that was. If only I had just said that I had no useful skills, I could have been sent to the dangerous front lines right away. So you didn't need to go to the front lines? Some of the others were overjoyed at their luck. It was the opposite for me. I had only wanted to get drunk on the liquor known as dying for the sake of one's country. The US planes did nothing but cut across the skies of that forgotten island. They didn't have even a bullet to spare for me, and much less a bomb. Is this the time you met Beatrice, grandfather? Correct. She came to me from the sea. Where did you meet her? You mentioned an island. Yes, this island. That's where she arrived. So you met here on Rakenjima. What's going on? I heard that Rakenjima was uninhabited until you bought it, grandfather. I never knew there was a Japanese military base here. Yes, you could hardly call it a military base. It was just a cave. I was one of the guards of that cave. 1944 real, so go look it up yourself. I don't know anything about history. Not even US history. Due to the honorable defeats at Saipan and Guam, Japan's absolute national defense zone strategy was in shambles. Where had the gallantry shown at Pearl Harbor gone? The old attackers were now the ones on the defensive. At that time, it was said that the last trump card for the Japanese military was a type of manned torpedo known as the Kaiten. It was said that these ultimate weapons, packed with 1.55 tons of explosives, were capable of sinking any kind of warship with a single blast. To strengthen homeland defense, the Navy drafted a plan to build a string of hidden bases from Hachizo Island to Yokosuka, all the house submarines loaded with Kaiten torpedoes. I knew that there was a Kaiten base constructed in Hachizo Island, but was there actually one in Rakenjima too? What fool decided it would be a good idea to plant a base on this desolate island? To better preserve its secrecy? Ridiculous. I could never understand what the higher-ups were thinking, and I didn't particularly want to. The Kaiten, which could finish off a large warship with a single strike, truly was an ultimate weapon. It was hoped that the presence of submarines capable of loading these weapons in the waters just off of Japan would allow for a powerful sea ambush as a final line of defense. So to aid in the establishment of a base, with absolute secrecy, the uninhabited island of Rakenjima was raised as a possible candidate. An investigation of the island resulted in the discovery of a large cave in the cliffs. This was apparently deemed to be a suitable location for a submarine base. So you were tasked with aiding in the establishment of that base? Establishment? Certainly, if you can call digging out a cave establishment. Not only that, the base was abandoned before its completion. Why? because at that time, Japan no longer had any submarines large enough to transport a Kaizen torpedo. How truly laughable. What's the point in having a submarine base if there aren't any submarines left? If there's one thing that never changes, it's politicians and their meaningless projects. He does like history stuff, yeah. It's pretty clear. The base on Hachijo Island was outfitted with Kaizen torpedoes and became a base for direct attacks. Arakenjima was never supplied with any. Furthermore, the construction was eventually suspended, and a minimum number of men were stationed on the island, waiting for orders from above that never came. Could the fact that it was a hidden base actually seal their fate? The higher-ups had already completely forgotten about this useless and pointless cavern. We were nothing more than guards for a mere cave. We spent our days farming, fishing, and playing with the dirt, all the while gazing up at the American formations flying past. Some of our group were relieved at the prospects of the war ending before anyone remembered we were here, and before any of us had to face a real battle. Of course, it was the opposite for me. I hoped and hoped for the American troops to advance and kill me as soon as possible. Those days were empty and blank. Let us go back. Back to the turning point in my life and my fate. The time that Ushimida Kinzo finally became truly alive. Always thirsty. Step it up. What are you doing slacking off when the fighting's so close? Stars seem to spin around inside my head. I could just lie down on the floor, but that'd only make him more angry. I've got no intention of being obedient. Still, it'd be stupid to get myself punched for no reason, so I got up and stood at attention. The fighting's close, is it? You really think the American troops are likely to show up on this forgotten island? Then let them come right now. That's what I've been waiting for all this time. What's this cowardly look you're wearing? Is this how afraid you are of death? Are you so scared of those Americans? You won't be killing any of them with an attitude like that. I got hit again. Would you please quit your whining already? Filthy cowards. They let themselves be controlled by this inexplicable anger because it's the only way to distract themselves from their own fear. Heart and spirit aren't of any use when the battle becomes hopeless. When trapped by an insurmountable hopelessness, humans tend to rely on several other emotions to escape their fear. For these young, inexperienced soldiers, anger was a very convenient emotion to fall back upon. Anger is the wine they used to paralyze their fear. It made them chant, "Damn the British, damn the Americans," as they swung their bamboo spears around and called it drilling. The more wine you drink, the more you need to drink to get drunk. Their useless anger continued to pile up, day after day without pause. I did not fear death, so I had no need of the wine called anger. This made their cowardice all the more apparent to me. What's that look on your face? Ushimiya, you lost your nerve down to your very soul. You're a fish, that's what you are. You've got the eyes of a dead fish. However, it went both ways. Just as I was able to spot their cowardice, they were able to pick up on my lethargy. I don't know. Go to Wikipedia. Ask Auntie Wikipedia. I don't know. Is Ushimiya Kinzo here? The lieutenant's looking for you. Stand up. No slouching about. Double time. First Lieutenant Yamamoto was the commanding officer in charge of the Yokanjima garrison. He was just another filthy coward trying to forget his fear of violence, and would often reprimand his subordinates for slacking off at the drop of a hat. Whenever he was in a good mood and started spouting off stories of his life, they were all about how much of a thug he had been, ignoring the rules of society. On and on about how so-and-so was a prick, so he taught him a lesson, or how everyone was so scared of him that he got special treatment. He kept on talking about what a vile human he was, as though it was a badge of honor. Normally, I had nothing to do with this lieutenant who I couldn't respect in any way. He'd always hang around with his non-commissioned subordinates, so as long as I treated him with a snappy salute, I could more or less ignore him for the time being. Now that the construction project on this island has been suspended indefinitely, there's no longer any use for an engineer like me. So why did the lieutenant ask to see me specifically? At the moment, I couldn't think of anything. Ah, Ushimiya, I hear you're good with foreign languages. Is that true? I'm proficient in both English and Chinese, sir. The lieutenant liked to brag about his education in front of the non-commissioned officers. But he held a bit of a grudge against me for being even more highly educated than him. Since he also felt uncomfortable having a subordinate who was older than him, I wasn't exactly the type he'd be willing to confide in. Just the fact that I knew several languages must have hurt his pride. What about Italian? I don't speak that. So you wouldn't be much help as an interpreter between me and an Italian person, would you? Should be possible if they can speak English as well. Ah, yes, very true. Have you ever talked with a foreigner in English? I have. I once would he need an interpreter in a cave on an uninhabited island that even our superiors forgot about. His question made it clear that some guest had arrived on Rakenjima who would need an interpreter. Good. Lushimiya, you'll be my interpreter. That's an order. That evening, I found out exactly what he was talking about. That pointless submarine dock in the cavern that had never been used was now being approached slowly by a submarine of the Italian Navy. Of course, I knew that the Italians were our allies. However, this was the first time I'd seen anything from their military with my own eyes. What was the Italian Navy doing here? Didn't Italy surrender in 1943? She sure has a good memory for that stuff. Better than I do. What's going on? It was the Kingdom of Italy that surrendered. However, those who couldn't accept that surrender joined Mussolini and formed the RSI, so that they could continue fighting. The RSI? The Italian Social Republic, also known as the Salo Republic. You know your history. The ignorant often called the Italians cowards, saying that they surrendered first to the Axis powers in 1943. That's not true. The military of the Italian Social Republic fought bravely from the outbreak of war until April 29, 1945. And Berlin fell just 3 days after that. Far from being cowards, they gave it hell of a fight. Still, I'm surprised the RSI Navy even had possession of a submarine that could travel all the way to Japan. Even if they did, it's a surprise that they'd come out this far at all. Why would they come to Japan? To Rakenjima? The submarine was both weather-worn and massive. I doubt anyone had even imagined that a foreign submarine would come all the way out here, when we never even had one of our own submarine stock. All the guards on Rakenjima, of which there were only about 30, stood at attention as the submarine docked. Never seen the Italian military before. I heard a mine or some accident trashed their sub. From what I heard, it sounds like their ventilator broke down and the cabin got packed with chlorine gas. The lieutenant was hinting about there being something very important in there. You mean like a code machine or the blueprints for some new kind of engine? I couldn't care less what they're carrying. I'm more surprised that the higher-ups still remember we exist. Hurry up, Ushimiya. How are you supposed to interpret from over there? Yes, sir. On top of the hatch was a young Italian saluting us. Normally this should have been the job of a commissioned officer, but his clothes looked like those of a sailor, and it really didn't look like he had the dignity and composure of a ship's captain. That probably meant that all the commissioned officers in charge had died in the accident that had befallen the sub. Crew members crawled out of the hatch one by one, but they all looked pale and entirely worn out. I'm not sure how long ago the accident happened, but being crammed together in a tiny sub filled with chlorine gas for any amount of time can't be good for your health. Not only had the ventilators broken, but traveling about carelessly on the surface of the waters around Japan these days would be foolish in the extreme. It had been like a trip inside a can of poison gas, almost all of them weren't able to walk without leaning on someone else. It looked like a bunch of people staggering out of a hospital boat. Ushimiya, asked them who the captain is. Told them that I'm in charge of this island. Welcome to Japan. Do any of you speak English? The crew members seemed to understand that I was speaking English, but it looked as though none of them could speak it. Eventually, someone who seemed to be dressed as an officer saluted. Welcome to Japan. Are you the captain? I could not speak English. Please, wait. The officer answered in slow, laborious English. After asking us to wait, he shouted something to his subordinates in rapid Italian. It looked as though he was telling them to get someone among them who could speak English. Ushimiya, what are they talking about? They've asked us to wait. They might be looking for someone there who can speak English. At that moment, I heard a high-pitched cough. It wasn't a man's cough. It was a woman's. Look, it's the original Beatrice. I speak English. As she came down from the hatch, a woman with beautiful golden hair said this in English. In this filthy cavern, the appearance of one as beautiful as she was deemed like an angel descending upon us. Welcome to Japan. Is the captain there? The captain is dead. That man over there is the only officer left. My condolences. Can we do anything to assist you? We'd like some fresh air and water. Some of us are still having trouble breathing, and we'd like a place to rest. We would be happy to help. Do any of the others understand English? The ones who did are all dead. I'm the only one left. Ushimiya, what's that woman talking about? Who's the captain? That man from a second ago? Who is that woman? Get translating already, goddammit. The lieutenant has been yelling like that for a while now. He must have been surprised to see such a beautiful woman appear from a submarine, and more than a little annoyed to see all her attention focused on me alone. It was a mark of how divinely beautiful she was. Sir, it seems that she's the only one who understands English. She will act as their interpreter. Their captain is dead. That officer seems to be acting in his place. Who's that loud man who keeps yelling at you? Don't tell me he's your superior. Unfortunately, he is. He probably doesn't like seeing me have such a beautiful lady all to myself. Oh? I didn't expect flattery from an Asian. Your English is superb. I imagine you've been brought up very well. Unlike that rude man who keeps on shouting. They should have made you the officer in charge around here. What's this like? Okay, so it's Japanese, but it's highlighted with these just to show that they're speaking in English. I see. I don't like that rude man who keeps on shouting. Yada yada. Oh, I never expected flattery from a Westerner. You're an interesting man. What's your name? Ushirimiya Kinzo. If you don't mind, may I ask for your name as well? Beatrice Castiglione. Welcome, Beatrice Macaroni. Welcome to Japan. That was when I first met Beatrice, the woman who would capture my heart for the rest of my life. So, Beatrice was an Italian? Yes. She was the daughter of a high-ranking RSI official. Apparently, the most important cargo was her father himself. Sadly, he'd already died by the time they reached Rakenjima. How would a high official like that come to Japan? You're saying he went through the Suez Canal and crossed the Indian Ocean to come all the way here? That's a good point. If they wanted to reach one of their allies, Germany should have been much closer. So why would they make the long trip to Japan? It may have been part of some grand, outrageous strategy. I don't know all the details, but shortly after, I learned that this submarine's mission was far from a minor one. They said that there had been about 60 of them at the time of their departure. However, only about 10 of them, including Beatrice, had survived. The submarine had apparently hit a mine or something in the nearby waters and sustained a great deal of damage. They told us that it had been flooded rapidly with water, which had taken out the batteries and released a large amount of chlorine gas. The sub had become completely incapable of continuing further, nothing but a massive lump of metal floating by the dock. Since the sub seemed to be carrying something of immense value, the higher-ups ordered us to investigate. After questioning the Italians, with Beatrice and me acting as double interpreters, we concluded that this thing of immense value must have been her father himself. Apparently, Beatrice's father was extremely high up in the RSI hierarchy. It was thought that he might have worked alongside Mussolini himself. But their massive voyage had apparently been part of some top-secret mission. Now that the man himself and all the commissioned officers had died, the reason for coming to Japan remained a mystery. And our higher-ups were telling us to investigate, which meant that even they didn't know what it was. Their ship had broken down, the mission was unknown, and the high official they had been carrying was dead. And I have the hiccups. No. Think about that. And even the Japanese government didn't know why they were here. The Italians' great and perilous voyage had come to a meaningless and utterly fruitless end. That's a relief. I always assumed the seas of Japan would smell like soy sauce. What a coincidence. I've always thought Italians had hair made of pasta. Of course we do. You don't know how hard it is to get that perfect al dente texture. I imagine you Japanese all wear spaghetti al nero. I see you've done your homework. In Japan we use squid ink instead of shampoo. You really are amazing, Kinzo. Seems you know everything. Have you ever been to Italy? Never. I've read a lot of books, though. An Asian man reading Italian books? No, what kinds of books? Niccolo Machiavelli and Dante Alighieri. So I know, of course, that you're the Eternal Lady. Oh, what a surprise. You must be quite the bookworm. Does this mean you come from some Japanese noble family? Who knows? You're completely different from those other savage-looking Japanese soldiers. I can tell. You must have come from a noble family. Are the Ushimiya some sort of Japanese aristocrats? Of course not. They just managed to strike it rich in the spinning industry in recent generations. I didn't study all that as part of some noble's hobby. I just did it because I wasn't allowed to do anything except read, play out with roses, and get myself drunk. This is being honest. There had been no trace of malice in Beatrice's words. It had just been a curious question asked to a friend from a faraway country. However, Beatrice was from a noble family herself, so she could tell. She could see the faint gloomy look in Kinzo's face. Forgive me, Kinzo. I didn't stop to consider why a high-class person like you would choose to take the position of a common soldier. I don't give a damn about my family line. When I die, the name Ushimiya will have no hold on me. Then, I'll finally be free. So you joined the army because you wanted to die? You mustn't do that. Family would be so sad. I wish Beatrice was correct. Family? I have no family. I have a wife for the sake of public appearances and children. However, I've never wanted any of them. Everything is a fleeting daydream created by the selfish, greedy elders. So at least when I'm on this island, I can forget about all of that and find some peace. Peace? But haven't I spent each and every day complaining that I wasn't sent to the front and haven't managed to die yet? I can't understand the pain you're going through, but I do realize that my thoughtless words have hurt you. Forgive me, Kinzo. Forgive me, Kinzo. Yes, those words are probably what did it. All the Japanese called me Ushimiya. It reminded me that I was the property of the Ushimiya family every time they talked to me. But she was different. She called me Kinzo, not Ushimiya. So maybe, just for the time I chat with her like this, I can forget that cursed family. Kinzo, I had meant to make Beatrice feel guilty, but she seemed certain that her thoughtless words had hurt me. Thank you. Huh? Since you always call me Kinzo, I finally feel like I'm my own man. I think that I finally met a person who truly sees me for who I am. Kinzo, you may be a foreigner I met in a distant land, but I can tell that your heart is sensitive and beautiful. If we had grown up in the same neighborhood, I'm sure we would have become fast friends. I'm happy to. You always call me Beatrice, not the daughter of the Castiglione family. What a sweet story. We were both in the same position. Our Castiglione family must have been a rigid place as well. Though we come from different countries, we'd finally found something that we both understood. Do you have a nickname that people close to you use? No. They usually just call me Kinzo. Well, then you should stop calling me Beatrice. All my close friends used to call me Bice. I'd like you to call me that too. Very well. From this point on, I'll call you Bice as a sign of our friendship. Ah, come on. Don't be all stiff like that. It's probably a Bice. I don't know, but I'm gonna say Bice because that sounds too close to bitch. We're already friends, okay? A bright smile stretched across Beatrice's face. No matter how many decades pass, that smile will never fade from my memory. So, by meeting Beatrice, you managed to regain your sense of self. Or as most people would put it, he cheated on his wife. If you plan to continue being rude, I suggest you get in the habit of covering your butt. After having his butt pinched once more, we'll have to run to pathetic agony. So in your eyes, grandfather, Arkanjima was always special because you first met Beatrice here. Indeed. If I had never come to this island, I would have never met her. It truly is an island of miracles. Is there anything left of that submarine base today? Yes, it's still there, near Kuodorian. It's in the shadows of a cove that can't be seen from the outside. After all, fishermen never approach this supposedly ill-omened island. It's unlikely that anyone besides me still knows of its distance. Is the 2-kilometer-long underground passage between Kuodorian and the mansion a remnant of that base? That is correct. There was some nonsense about fortifying several locations across the island and connecting them with tunnels carved out of limestone caverns. I made use of that underground passage and built 2 mansions, one at each end of the island. 2 mansions, 2 families. The Ushimiya family mansion, and a mansion for the Kinzo released from the shackles of the family. Correct. It was something I needed. Another place for me to escape from the cursed name of Ushimiya. So, that's a bit more like reasoning as to why this whole convoluted thing with 2 mansions exists in the first place. There was already a passage. Kinzo had the money after this. Still, I do feel bad for you. It must be awful to have come all the way out here and be unable to fulfill your mission. I don't really know what Papa's plan was. He said we needed to run far away to hide it until the time came. And what is it? I don't know. It was something very important, and he planned to hide it for many years until the right moment. Oh, and he planned to hide himself along with it. And not because he apologized to me for sending us to live a long time in foreign soil. Didn't that second lieutenant of yours say that you had no cargo in particular, and that you were transporting your father instead? Lieutenant Angelo doesn't trust you or the others. Even I know a few things he's kept hidden from you. You might even know what Papa's goal was and what the cargo is. Whatever it is, that's a mission for the Italian military. It has nothing to do with us. After all, we're allies. We should be able to trust each other. I have no doubts that you're a good person, Kinzo. I even told Lieutenant Angela that you're a man we can trust, but why is it that men always get so rigid and uptight when they're in a strange land? Normally, they're all very bright and cheery people. Ever since we came here, there's been this strange feeling of tension. Lieutenant Angelo has ordered that his subordinates be armed at all times. It's almost as though we're in enemy territory. That was true. The Italians were clearly the very opposite of relaxed. The Japanese soldiers, watching this, began to suspect that the Italians didn't really trust them at all. That's normal for a soldier. This is precisely the time for them to straighten up their guard, so they don't embarrass themselves in front of a friendly army. They have a person stand watch every time they sleep. And they're still keeping a lookout to make sure none of you approach the submarine, even though it's nothing more than an unusable scrap heap by now. It almost feels as though they're clearly prejudiced against the Japanese, and that bothers me. True, they had set up a constant sentry with the submarine, and refused to let any of the Japanese soldiers come near. This hadn't made the Japanese particularly happy. However, submarines are treated as classified in all countries. Maybe it was just natural for them to stop foreigners from approaching it without reason. They're probably uncomfortable with being made to live in a way they aren't used to. The boat that's supposed to take you back to the mainland is still being delayed by weather and problems up the command chain. Just how long will it take before they can send you there? We had been told that a boat was being sent for them directly from the mainland, but apparently, thanks to the weather, problems up the command chain, and the recent air raids... Kirby air raid? They had no ships they could spare on a forgotten island like this. There may have been political issues as well. After all, the Italians' homeland had already surrendered to the Allies. I didn't know the details. The only thing I knew for sure was that they'd been stuck on Arkanjima for 2 whole weeks and no one had come to get them. Of course, we had some small boats on Arkanjima. There was nothing physically stopping us from taking them to a nearby island. Still, Arkanjima was technically a top-secret base, and contact with the outside world had been strictly forbidden. Well, there's nothing we can do about it, and it isn't all that bad, really. After all, if a boat did come for us, I'd probably never see you again, Kinzo. True. To me, those 2 weeks were the first I'd ever truly lived. The faint 20 years before all seemed to vanish in the sparkle of that pair of weeks. I realized that she'd have to leave this place eventually, and yet this single moment felt so rich and dazzling that I felt myself wishing it could last forever. Then I heard a voice calling for Beatrice in Italian. It's Lieutenant Angelo. Looks like he wants you for something. Probably to scold me. These days he keeps yapping on about how I shouldn't get too friendly with the Japanese soldiers. A second lieutenant approached, saluting Kinzo, and after glancing at Beatrice as though asking her to translate something, he began to speak in Italian. Judging by his tone, it sounded like something serious. Lieutenant Angelo has something very important to say, so he wants to talk with your commanding officer. He wants your help with something. I don't know what. Something important? Got it. I'll go find Lieutenant Yamamoto. Lieutenant Angelo had 2 of his subordinates with him and wore a stern expression on his face. He didn't have to say anything for us to realize that this had to be something very serious. That's it. Lift it up. The winch creaked and the thick chains rang out with a dull clang. Very, very slowly, it was lifted out of the submarine's cargo hold. Now I get it. So this is why those Italians didn't want to steer their sub. The first lieutenant and the others looked up at what the winch was slowly lifting up, all of them wearing unpleasant forced smiles. Unbelievable. So this is what Papa brought all this way? Incredible. I've never seen anything like this. It was a mountain of gold ingots. Those carefully piled bars were being slowly lifted out of the cargo hold, one group after another. This gold had been their true cargo. I don't know where they were planning to take it. They might have been trying to sneak it into Japan, one of their allies, or they might have been on their way to hide it in some remote area. Was it some sort of strategy? A conspiracy? Embezzlement? Top secret transportation of wealth? This incomprehensible amount of gold led to all sorts of dark suspicions, but we didn't know anything about the truth. All told, the gold weighed an incredible 10 tons. That was the only truth we could wrap our minds around at the moment. So now we know where the gold is from. They had strongly resisted showing this to us. However, the submarine could no longer make sea, and was apparently continuing to take in water bit by bit. Arkanjima had been outfitted in an extremely slipshod way, so we had no means of repairing it. Also, though we could unload the sub, there was no way we'd be able to lift it up again once it had filled with water and sunk to the bottom. Now that transporting the gold away had clearly become an impossible goal, they had apparently decided on unloading it. Of course, they made no effort to explain the reason behind all this gold. They just asked us to help them take it out. Why would they take so much gold out of the country? Couldn't they have changed the course of the war with this much wealth? Weapons change the course of war, but after the war, they aren't useful for anything. Money can also change the course, but it remains just as valuable after the war. There's no longer any way to change the course of this war. The Axis powers will probably all surrender, leading to an Allied victory. Anyone could tell that simply by looking at the American planes flying across the sky day after day. However, gold does not lose its value after war. Everyone stared upwards, dumbfounded, as the winch slowly lifted the dully sparkling gold. Big revelations. Spooky music, too. Lieutenant Yamamoto, the Italians don't want us to tell the mainland about this gold. Heh. So they don't want our country to snatch it away from them. What did he say? He's saying your group probably doesn't want it reported, because you fear that Japan will steal it away from you. Lieutenant Angelo is actually more afraid of Italy itself finding out. To us, our homeland's current government is a mere puppet set up by the Allied forces. If they find out, the gold will be returned to them. However, that would be the same as handing the gold over to our enemies. They'd come all this way to make sure that the gold didn't fall into enemy hands. They needed to hide it from that puppet government until their homeland could be truly restored. Yoshimiya, make a proposal to the Italians. Tell them that we wish to offer our assistance. What sort of assistance? Let's see if I've got this straight. They want that gold kept secret so their homeland doesn't find out about it. But they'll need to find at least a transport ship if they plan to carry it off this island. If they try that though, the mainland will hear about it, which means the Italian government will too. That's right. In other words, there's no longer any way to take that gold off of Kanjima. Their mission must have been to hide the gold in absolute secrecy until the day of their homeland's restoration. Later on, several plausible rumors would circulate about how Nazi Germany also moved much of its secret wealth to certain hidden areas in South America just prior to its collapse. It was a very natural conclusion to reach. Hold on, I think a cat pooped. I need to go check. Hold on a sec. It's very stinky, I can smell it from here. Boy, I had a wax melt going and everything, and I could still smell that right through it. Ooh. Right, I'm only gonna go on for a little bit longer. Short stream, I know, but, well, Strive didn't exactly work out and I did it. A submarine was their only method of transporting the gold in secrecy, and it's become completely useless. They can't fully stop the water from seeping in, and it'll probably sink completely before much longer. There's no longer any way for them to transport the gold in secrecy. Honestly, a 2-hour stream is probably more normal than like a 6-hour stream, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know what average is, really. I guess Dylan's average is 5, which is kind of what I base mine on, but I can't always do that. I want to go eat pizza and play Cataclysm. Can you blame me? In other words, their mission has ended in failure here in the Far East. But I want to stream Cataclysm, not when it's like an ongoing run, and I'm safe scumming anyway. So just how is Lieutenant Yamamoto proposing that we assist them? The Arkanjima base is top secret and no one knows about it. The islanders in the surrounding area think this island's ill-omened and deserted, so they never come near it. Yeah. My character's precogs. I'm doing magicalism, so I start off with some good magic. I just monobolt everything. I tried some other regular runs prior to that, but I'm just so annoyed with like the game's combat and just missing stuff all the time, especially at the start of the game. And I just want it's probably too easy, honestly, because your magic never misses. I wish there were a good middle ground between just slaughtering stuff with magicalism and not being able to 1v1 anything unless you start with like really good melee. Which feels like it's a waste of points because you could grind it up. You could save the points and put them into something permanent like stats that you can't gain otherwise. But no. Get ready for a miserable start to the game if you try that. You'll be able to fight anything. You swing the zombie like 5 times, the zombie punches you in the arm, you're like, ow, ow, I can't hit anything now. Another 20 turns before you land a single hit. By then, you're probably just dead. Yeah, ranged weapons are cool too. I mean, that's essentially what I'm doing in magicalism. I like spears. I like hitting things from just a tile or two away. I think that's kind of nice. Cutting stuff around. Catch my drift, Ushimiya? What did he say? As we told you earlier, no one knows about this base. And as you can see, it's of no use strategically, so the higher-ups have already forgotten about it. Sounds like Lieutenant Yamamoto suggesting that you hide the gold on this island. Beatrice quickly translated this and told Lieutenant Angelo. They began discussing something rapidly with his subordinates. They didn't look happy. Japan may have been their ally, but they probably didn't want to leave the gold for reconstructing their motherland in Asian hands. Still, it was hard to imagine any other option for them. It's a fierce debate. Some say that there's no other option, while others think we should remain loyal to our homeland no matter the cost. Lieutenant Angelo is stuck between a rock and a hard place. The final order given to them by their fallen homeland was to hide the gold. However, by now, there was no way for that order to be carried out successfully. If the mainland, or their own homeland, found out, the gold would probably be confiscated by the wrong people from their point of view. Also, with Cataclysm, ranged weapons, if you use guns, you are attracting every zombie in the area, and that sucks. To be fair, with Monobolt, it's not much better because a lot of the time whatever you kill explodes, but at least that means that the point of origin for the sound is the zombie and not you. So you might be able to work around it somewhat. You want me to play Cataclysm with a slingshot? How do you propose I kill anything that isn't like a basic ass zombie with a slingshot? That's going to be very, very difficult. If they really wanted to carry out their homeland's orders faithfully, Lieutenant Yamamoto's proposal was extremely reasonable. Though he couldn't understand their words, he seemed to realize how divided they were. If we help out, we'll be able to hide the gold in total secrecy. Fortunately, there's an abandoned tunnel that stretches all the way across this island. He's saying that, if you hide the gold underground and bury it out in this island, no one will be able to find it. Our side is saying that it sounds like a realistic proposal. However, there seems to be some resistance to accepting Japanese help. Seems they're having difficulty coming to a decision. You really have a choice, Italians? You don't think you can hide that gold without our help, do you? I doubt you want to leave it lying around on the beach for much longer. Lieutenant Angelo wants to minimize the number of people who know about the gold. Hey Yuzo, evening. You are seeing a flashback between the original Beatrice Castiglione, and Ginzo during World War II. You know, I think I'm just going to leave Rico right there. I'm only going to be going on for a little bit longer, though. Short stream today. So the gold came from an Italian submarine. The Italians had to dock there because they hit a mine. So filled with chlorine gas, people started dying. They were transporting the gold and just keeping it safe. But he seems suspicious. About what? He's wondering whether they really intend to move a full 10 tons of gold and swear themselves to secrecy. Without any sort of compensation. 50%. Sir, you can't be. Hand over half of the gold to us. With that as our work wages, we'll hide the other half nice and safe for them. Just to catch you up real quick. Ginzo became totally, like, miserable as a result of being a puppet to the main Ushima family, and went off to war in hopes that he could die in the front lines, but they turned him into an engineer. Oops. So he's stationed on Arkanjima in a sub-base that ended up not getting used. He's telling you to give us half of it. The instant Beatrice translated that sentence, Lieutenant Angelo slammed his hands on the desk and stood up. Instead of flinching, Lieutenant Yamamoto, true to his boast of once being a thug who everyone feared, actually looked even more relaxed and confident than he had previously. After all, they really don't have the option of refusing. We could demand 80% if we wanted. I've lowered that to 50% as a sign of good faith. Of course, we aren't the only ones with leverage here. If the Italians decide to leak this to the outside, all the gold will probably be taken by Japan or Italy. We won't even get a single yen out of it. This could only work if we're both partners in crime here. He's saying we should all be partners in the crime of embezzlement. But now he's already moved on to speaking as an individual, not as a soldier. I don't believe it. So the gold has blinded him. Lieutenant Yamamoto was grinning. So they're the only ones who know English here, which is like a shared language. Everyone else is Japanese or Italian only, so they're acting as interpreters. They're interpreter buddies. It really did look as though he had been blinded by greed, just as Beatrice said. If they leave it just piled up where it is, you can be sure that it'll be noticed when the boat comes from the mainland. If that happens, none of us will profit. But just put a blanket over it. They ought to accept our proposal and hide the gold as soon as possible. Sounds like Lieutenant Angelo is dead set on the Japanese and Italian governments not finding out about this. He wants to carry out his duty until the end. So what exactly does that mean? He wants the gold buried deep within the island, even if he has to pay some percentage to buy your silence. Of course, some of his subordinates object strongly. They're saying that 50% is out of the question. Ushidamiya, how are they doing? They also don't want any more people laying eyes on the gold. However, they seem to object to the portions. Lieutenant Angelo says they'll consider 10%, though he's also saying he's fairly sure Yamamoto won't accept that. Ushidamiya, what's the Italians' answer? They say they'll consider 10%. This time, it was Lieutenant Yamamoto who slammed down at the desk. But the Italians didn't flinch either. Incredible tension filled the small room. However, despite his violent outburst a second ago, Lieutenant Yamamoto's expression still looked smug and in control. He was probably confident that he now had the initiative. 10%. Now there's a modest proposal. Okay, sure. I'll give up 10%. That's ballsy, Yamamoto. We'll split it 40-60. Tell them I won't go any lower than that. 40% for the Japanese, 60% for the Italians. The lieutenant was talking tough, but in truth, these negotiations weren't being made on an equal footing. If the Italians had just wanted the gold for themselves, there wouldn't have been much of a problem. But what if they were true patriots, decided to return the gold for the purpose of reconstruction, even to the defeated puppet government of their homeland? If so, they would probably report the existence of the gold to the Italian embassy. Eventually, the Italian government would petition the Allied nations for the retrieval of their gold. It probably wouldn't all make it back to Italy, but it might be used effectively to repair and rebuild their battered towns. If that happened, Lieutenant Yamamoto and his friends would only be able to sneak out a few ingots at most. That's still a lot of money. He was greedily planning to make this his own treasure island so that he and his subordinates could have an enormous fortune all to themselves. If he wanted to succeed, the Italians would have to keep the presence of the gold quiet. But there's one thing I don't get. Lieutenant Angelo doesn't want to let anyone have the gold. He could have just let the submarine sink. Why did he have it unloaded? I'd rather not think about it. But Lieutenant Angelo might have started planning to embezzle the gold as soon as he realized that the mission would be impossible to complete. Right now, he's asking subordinates for their opinions, both as soldiers and as individuals with families waiting for them to come back home. The more straight-laced soldiers are furious. The discussion between the Italians was becoming fierce and emotional. Though their homeland had fallen, they'd all come this way in accordance with its orders. They had probably been given this mission because they were particularly faithful and duty-minded troops. It seemed they couldn't just agree to a foreigner's proposal to embezzle and split up the gold. Lieutenant Angelo looked like he was doing all he could to calm the unexpectedly fervent rage of his subordinates. Looks like the gold is blinding them too. Everyone's mixing up their true feelings with how they want to be seen, and they can't make up their minds. How's their answer coming? Ushidamiya. Peace. Lieutenant Yamamoto's asking for an answer. They're saying they want some time to think. I had you to talk to, so I was able to distract myself from our current situation, but that wasn't true for the rest of them. I guess out of curiosity, I will check. It is in fact Bice. But yeah, I'm just gonna go with Bice. I had you to talk to, so I was able to distract myself from our current situation, but that wasn't true for the rest of them. They lost a lot of comrades at the end of a very long journey, and now they're here and in a tight spot. They've even lost their mission, the one thing they could depend on to guide them. They don't know what to do. No, it's Bice. Again, it's Beatrice, Bice, so it's just a shortening of it. Italian pronunciation. Sir, they say they'll take some time. Sure, let them talk it over all they want, but they better not take too long. If we're gonna hide the gold, that'll take time and effort. Make your decision before noon tomorrow. That's all, Italians. He's giving you until noon tomorrow. That bastard, he's practically threatening you. Lieutenant Angelo says he'll ask for everyone's thoughts on the matter. Which way do you think they'll go? It'll probably be tough going. Seems Lieutenant Angelo is willing to consider splitting it, but his subordinates and the others will probably oppose that. All of them have lost close friends on their voyage to the Far East. They're firm in their desire to do their duty for their homeland. Will they refuse Lieutenant Yamamoto's proposal? Even if they do, the gold will just fall into someone else's hands. If nothing is going to be left anyway, Lieutenant Angelo suggests that they each sneak at least 1 ingot back with them. And some of the others seem to agree, but I always get carried away at times like this. Even I can't guess what they'll do. Imagine the Italians had some complicated feelings about all this. In their eyes, they believed that surrender was probably a little better than an enemy country. Letting the gold go back there would make their entire voyage meaningless. However, embezzling and divvying up the gold would also make their entire voyage meaningless. The country they felt obligated to serve had already fallen. That alone destroyed the significance of their journey. Not a happy story for them. If it's bound to be meaningless anyway, wouldn't keeping hold of even just a few ingots be better than nothing? Sure, if you want to calculate straight up profit and loss. But men aren't like that. The Italians were gathered in a cramped room, arguing fiercely. I don't like it. We must remain true to our soldier spirit till the end for the sake of our fallen comrades. And how do you find remaining true? By hiding the gold on this island? By accepting the proposal of those Asians? We can't trust them, especially that Yamamoto person. We must let our guards down. Unloading the gold and letting the Japanese see it was a huge mistake. We should have let it sink with a sub. Oh, wonderful idea. Let's just sink it right inside a Japanese base. It would have been pulled up eventually. That wouldn't hide anything. It doesn't matter. There's no way to get the gold off this island without anyone knowing. If we had just taken the honorable path and scuttled the sub, none of this would have happened. If we had known then that the sub would be broken upon beyond repair, I don't know what scuttle means. Why did the lieutenant commander contact the Japanese military and ask for help? How was he planning to carry out our mission if they found out about the gold? Our mission was a failure from the moment he asked them for help. All of us have families waiting for us back home. And we've more than done our part, I'd say, voyaging all the way to this island country in the Far East. You might call this fair and just payment for our services. Lieutenant Angelo, if the Japanese prove to be less than amicable, we need to be prepared to take extreme measures. And what do you mean by extreme measures, Corporal? Someone gulped. A stiff tension hung over the room. The Japanese are pushovers. They're all cowards with no battle experience. And we're the elite. We know the layout of almost the entire base, along with the number of Japanese troops and how they're arranged. If Lieutenant Angelo gives the order, we should be able to subdue them quickly. Only a few of them, Yamamoto included, look like fighters. The rest are just laborers attached to the military. They may look like they have the advantage of numbers, but we have the greater military force. If we kill the Japanese, what exactly are we going to say when the boat comes to pick us up? You really think that'll work? There should be plenty of ways to work it as long as the corpses aren't found. Lieutenant Angelo, it'll be easy to subdue this base. If we kill Yamamoto and the few strong fighters, the laborers will probably surrender easily. Let's have them carry the gold and bury it. Of course, we'll have to silence them afterwards. Are you suggesting we massacre all of them? Let's do it. If we kill them all, no one will know about the gold. At that moment, the supposedly locked door opened slightly, and a metal object was thrown in. Granada! As the yell rang out, the table was kicked over to be used as a shield, and they all dropped to the floor. However, in this cramped room, it probably wouldn't do them any good. The Italians were all prepared for death. A dud. It's a dud. Fortunately, the shoddy grenade was a dud. The door was slammed open, and 3 Japanese soldiers wielding pistols jumped in. Damn it, it's a dud. Kill the Italians! Kill the Italians! Return fire. Fire at will. No, not at will. He's not here right now. Leave Will out of this. In this small room, no matter who shot where, it was bound to hit someone. The exchange of bullets instantly caused a rain of blood with casualties on both sides. The 3 had jumped in and were covered with bullet holes and fell over, muttering and thrashing. Gino. Damn it, they got his lung. We can't save him. We won't make it in time for Super Mario RPG. We should consider ourselves lucky. If that grenade had gone off, we'd all be dead. The grenade was still rolling about on the floor. It had been a surprise attack. Lieutenant Yamamoto had probably judged that negotiations wouldn't go his way, and had decided to make the first move. Or maybe he'd been planning from the beginning to put them in a position where they'd be gathered in one place to discuss his offer. Arkenjamin was their island. If they killed all the Italians, not half, but all of the gold would go to the Japanese. There's a chance the grenade might go off late. The Italians rushed out into the corridor. He heard gunfire from down the hallway. It was coming from the direction of the submarine dock. Clearly, the troops guarding the pile of gold were being attacked. Lieutenant Angelo, what are your orders? You have no choice. Kill the Japanese. Lieutenant, these guys are good. Those Italians aren't your ordinary sailors. Yeah, I see. They needed men good enough to guard that gold after all. We have the numbers. Keep your cool, surround them, and kill them. Let's hunt some Italians. How horrifying. As soon as I heard the sound of repeated gunfire, I knew. I knew that something, which had been smoldering since the time the gold was unloaded, had finally burst. The eyes of our soldiers looking at the gold hadn't been normal. Yes, those eyes had been entranced by demons. The Italians had been pushed to the limits by the heavy burden they bore. Who wouldn't have snapped after being trapped in a distant land where you can't understand the language of the writing? Thinking I had to do something, I ran towards the sound of gunfire. Looking back on it, that was an extremely stupid thing to do. That sound meant that there were people shooting at each other. People killing each other. Yeah, unarmed as I was, I dashed toward the sound, as though I was trying to mediate some schoolyard fight. I didn't take long before I learned how foolish and naive that was in the heat of battle. Hiraoka? Warrant Officer Hiraoka was lying face down, his entire body drenched in blood. Judging by the trail of blood behind him, it was clear that he had somehow managed to crawl here from a different room before dying. No, he was still twitching. He might not be dead yet. But on this island without a doctor? No, even if we had a doctor. Who could possibly save a man who had been shot this many times in the chest? When I looked into the room he must have crawled out of, I saw 2 more bloodstained Japanese corpses. They're dead. I fell backwards pathetically in my butt, my mouth hanging open in shock. Come to think of it, that was the first time I'd ever faced death in my life. The entire world was at war. Even though millions were dying both east and west, this was the first time I'd met with a person's death directly. Ridiculous. Didn't I join the army hoping to die? Didn't I whine about not being sent to the front lines? Yes, so rejoice, Kinzo. Isn't this the death you were looking for? Why not spread your hands and yell out loud? Come for me, magnificent death. Because he's got a crush on Beatrice. Someone came running towards me. It was a colleague of mine, a Japanese man. Tajima-kun. Run! He dashed towards me, pale-faced and out of breath. His face seemed horribly contorted with terror. Mine probably looked the same. Tajima-kun, what happened? Run away. We'll all be killed. Someone yelled in Italian at the same time. Tajima-kun let out a scream. Then he grabbed onto me as he fell to the floor. A red stain was spreading across his back before my eyes. Tajima-kun. Run. As he spat bubbles of blood, he said that one word and died. The shock of seeing someone die right in front of me did not freeze my heart. At a fundamental level, all living things are unconcerned with the deaths of others. The one thing that matters is whether they let themselves die or not. It was the barrel of the gun the Italian soldier was pointing that froze my heart. Tajima-kun's back burst once more as he leaned against me. Flesh tore, blood splattered. The warm splash of it covered my face. Was the Italian still trying to finish him off, even though he had stopped moving for good? How foolish I've been. Can I still not understand the scene in front of me? Rejoice, Kinzo. Now you'll finally get what you've wanted all this time. The Italian had fired to finish off Tajima-kun. He'd been aiming at me. Sorry, he'd been aiming at the man Tajima-kun had fallen on. Me, Ushime Kinzo. Wah. I pushed his corpse aside, scrabbled against the floor, and dashed away, tumbling over myself. My hands had pushed up against the floor hard enough to tear off the ring fingernail in my left hand. When faced with death, humans truly can resist with all they've got. I tumbled over and over as I ran, scraping at parts of my body. It was painful, hot, but that didn't matter at all. I heard the yelling in Italian come from behind me over and over again. It felt like they were running, chasing after me. I didn't want to look back, so I kept on running and running, as though the Italians were right behind me. This is death. Didn't you want to die? No, I don't want to die. Why? Didn't I want to die so badly? But now I know. I know how wonderful it is to be alive. She taught me. Peace did. I can only be free when I talk with her. No, by talking with her, I finally came alive for the first time. I was born. I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. I want to live. I don't want to die. I want to live and see her right now. If I don't see her, I'll die. I'll be killed. Stay cool, Kinzo. She might be killed too. If you live and she dies, you might as well be dead. Before I knew it, my face was covered in tears, snot, and saliva. When I stumbled into something and fell, I was finally able to come to my senses a little. I could still hear intermittent gunfire. The gunfight was still going on, and it spread throughout the entire base. Bice, are you okay? I'll find her and take her to a safe place. The lieutenant will probably kill all the Italians to steal the gold. Bice probably will be an exception. Bice, I lived for the first time after meeting you. I was born. So if you die, I'll die again. I could feel every cell in my body being reborn. Not as Ushini Kinzo, but as a completely different Kinzo. He becomes Goldsmith. Not really, but you could kind of say that. Actually, I'd say Goldsmith is more of like the miserable Kinzo that he becomes later on once he gets into the occult. Kinzo Kiwami. Of course, I was terrified that I might really be shot if I went back, but I didn't want to die anymore, to truly die, so I was able to overcome my fear. Peace! Rubens, what on earth is going on? What is all this? There's no need for you to know. Just stay hidden there. Don't come out until one of your fellow countrymen calls for you. I heard an Italian voice. He's over there. Damn yellow monkeys. Rubens stood with Beatrice behind his back and neatly shot the two men rushing at him with two 9mm bullets from his Beretta M1934. However, one of the 8mm bullets from the Type 94 semi-auto pistols went straight into Rubens' chest. All three of the shooters were struck in the chest and fell down in a heap. No. Rubens. Go up to the surface. You have to hide in the forest. Ugh. Rubens. My, aren't we chatty? And its first to appear was the commanding officer of the Japanese soldiers, Yamamoto. The blast of 3 guns had just sounded. Adding on Beatrice's screams, it was hardly surprising that he had noticed the encounter. If it had to come to this anyway, we should have taken this woman as a hostage in the first place. Damn annoying, that's what they are. Yamamoto spat. Beatrice used that moment to snatch up Rubens' gun. Yeah. Get him, Beatrice. Well, look at you to reaching up to pick up a gun without missing a beat. Italian women sure are scary. Damn it, both of you screwed up. He spat this last part at the 2 dying men who lay moaning at his feet. However, what had happened to them wasn't particularly surprising. It wasn't the first time it had happened either. In this tiny cramped tunnel, nearly everyone had been head on. When both sides shot recklessly in such a situation, the result was 2 corpses. So ever since another person pulled the trigger quickest, won. That was the only way to survive this battle without a bullet in your chest. I don't think it would have really mattered either way. I don't think Beatrice was in the room where the grenade was thrown into. It would have just meant that the fight started differently, probably. Because of this, both Japanese and Italians had killed each other without hesitation, and they sometimes even pulled the trigger on oncoming allies. In the midst of all this were several Japanese men who had stumbled into the fight, wondering what was going on. It didn't matter whether the other person was holding a gun or not. Now, if Kinzo had died here, that would have changed Umineko, and I guess it wouldn't have happened. Everyone had reflexively pulled the trigger at the sight of anyone other than themselves, trying to stay alive. The entire base had been wrapped up in this slaughter. There was a fierce gun battle taking place in the submarine dock. And a massacre resembling a hunt was taking place inside the base. Most of the non-combatants assigned to this base were killed before they knew what was going on. The Italians were indeed quite seasoned troops, but the numbers began to drop bit by bit. Bloodstained corpses were scattered everywhere. At first, it had probably been a proper gunfight. However, as their minds began to grow weary and numb, it devolved into that most basic cause of wars throughout humanity. The desire to kill all foreigners you don't understand. Whenever they heard words they didn't understand, they pulled the trigger. At that point, the screams of foreigners sounded no different from those of man-shaped beasts. After all, they couldn't understand pleading in another language. So it long ago turned into a mere massacre. As the number of dead surpassed the number of living, silence began to return to the base. Just when it felt as though everyone had died, and you could hear the desolate sound of the wind blowing throughout the caves, there'd be a sudden scream, the crisp sound begun, and you'd remember that the massacre wasn't yet over. This happened over and over again, and eventually true silence fell. I marked the pitiful end for those led astray by the gold. But the leader of the Italian soldiers, Angelo, had managed to survive somehow. He encountered nothing but the corpses of friend and foe. All was quiet once more in the base. If he was careless enough to call out, he might be shot from the shadows somewhere. So he snuck about like a panther, breathing quietly and searching for remaining enemies. There was no sign or trace of any living person. Maybe all the people in this base had died. Damn Japanese. The Japanese struck first, but at that time we were also talking about killing them. They simply made the first move as military men. So perhaps we should be grateful for this day. Even if the boat had come to pick us up, there would have been no honor left for us. We would have been mere failures in a mission, unfit to face our dead comrades. Perhaps dying here in the Far East alongside my gun is a more fitting end for a soldier. I noticed the sound of shuffling feet coming from around the corner and strained to hear. Is someone seriously wounded and dragging their feet? Noticing them before they notice me greatly helps my chances. At this stage, there's no point in taking prisoners. We must dispose of all the Japanese. I'll dash around the corner, quickly check to see who they are, and shoot if it's a Japanese person. Nothing more. I've been hiding my footsteps the whole time. They probably don't know I'm here. Once the shuffling footsteps had come close enough, Angelo leaned around the corner and raised his gun. The voice that reached him spoke Italian. Run. You! I've been looking for you, Lieutenant Angelo. That makes all of you. I've been counting Italian corpses, you see. Lieutenant Angelo, are you okay? Blood poured from Angelo's chest. His gun fell to the floor, then his knees, and the rest of his body crumpled and stopped moving. Yamamoto's accuracy with the gun wasn't particularly stellar. However, Angelo had waited until they were fairly close before jumping out, so Yamamoto had made the shot. He had managed to hit, even with a short-barreled handgun in one hand and a woman as a hostage in the other. Really though, Arno Kinjima Garrison was pathetic. Am I the only one who's not dead? Trash, all of them. Can't you fight without using a woman as a shield, you brute? Let go. Quiet. Noisy, these Italian girls. Maybe just be cooperative, I'd at least spare your life. It was such an obvious lie that even he wore a bitter smile. The Italians were spies working for the enemy, and they all died along with the garrison in a gunfight. Since this was the story Yamamoto wanted to tell, he couldn't afford to have any Italian survivors. By this point, he wouldn't be able to keep the entire pile of gold, but he should be able to grab as many as he could carry. Even that would be worth a huge amount of money. Beatrice suddenly swung her head, smashing Yamamoto's nose hard. Someone help. Someone. Yeah. You bitch. Yeah. She almost managed to escape. However, Yamamoto quickly grabbed her leg and tripped her. She fell onto her back, and Yamamoto mercilessly stomped her foot down on her stomach and pointed his gun at her. I don't mind. I don't make a holly of taming tomboys. Die. Lieutenant Yamamoto, she had nothing to do with this. Let go of her. Kinzo had jumped out from the shadows. He was holding a gun he had stolen from one of the corpses. Yoshimiya. So you're alive. Let go. You're hurting her. It was you, wasn't it? You tipped the Italians off. What are you talking about? Yamamoto didn't know that the grenade had been a dud. He had been sure that the surprise attack would work, but it hadn't, so he'd assumed that Kinzo must have tipped them off. It's your fault the surprise attack failed and we're stuck like this. You turncoat, you traitor to your country. I know you've been working with them through this woman. Can't you see that you caused all this because you were blinded by gold? Run, Kinzo. This man has shot people begging for their lives. He'll shoot you too. Don't talk Italian. If you open your mouth again, I won't hesitate to shoot. It hurts. Yeah. Yamamoto ground his heel into Beatrice's gut. Stop it, stop it. She has nothing to do with all this. Oh, are you pointing a gun at a superior officer? Stop and think a bit, fool. If we agree to keep to the same story, we can have that pile of gold all to ourselves, okay? I can only grab a few on my own, but if we work together, we'll be able to sneak off with even more. I don't mean this as a superior officer. Let's split it equally between us as men. The last time you offered to split the gold 50-50, you tried to slit their throats. Yoshimiya, looks like you prefer lead to gold. Without any hesitation, Yamamoto raised the barrel of his gun towards Kinzo and pulled the trigger. It grazed Kinzo's right ear. If Yamamoto's aim had been just a bit better, the bullet would have slammed into Kinzo's face. Kinzo? How could you? You... Not letting Yamamoto's momentary distraction go to waste, Beatrice slashed out and planted a right foot in Yamamoto's crotch. After moaning in pain, a demonic expression flashed across Yamamoto's face, and he stomped on her chest. Bice, you bitch, die! Beatrice shut her eyes tightly, hoping that she could withstand the coming pain. No one wants to watch the moment they get shot. You... A blood splash poured out of Yamamoto's chest. Just as you took so many lives for your own personal reasons, I'll take your life for mine. Could Yamamoto hear Kinzo's words until the end? In his last moments, he seemed to grin. Then, slowly, he fell backwards with a spurt of blood. He kinda deserved it. Kinzo, are you okay? I was sure you'd been shot. Ugh. Beatrice tried to stand up, but then doubled over and started coughing. Bice, are you hurt? My ribs are hurting. That brute really was stomping them hard. Will you be okay? I hope they aren't broken. Italian women don't break so easily. But thanks. I owe you my life. If you wouldn't come, it would all have ended there. Ugh. Yamamoto had shown no mercy. Her ribs were probably cracked. We didn't have the option of waiting, possibly for several days, for the ship that was coming. I made the decision to carry her away from the island. The man who kept yelling about preserving the secrecy of the base is lying there dead. Nest island over, Nijima, it's close. A small boat should be more than enough to get us there. I need to take you to a hospital. The wound might be more serious than you realize. That's interesting. I never knew there was a hospital on this island. There isn't. A boat should get us to the next island over. We'll get you to a hospital. As for me, unless I cleverly cover up what happened on this island, I might end up getting court-martialed just for being here. I have a request. Please, don't take me to a hospital. Why? If you go to a hospital and the embassy is contacted, I'll eventually be sent back to Italy. Yep, so this was the original Beatrice, and the one in Quidorian was her daughter. That much has been made clear so far. If that happens, I'll be interrogated about all kinds of things. I won't acknowledge the bastards who let Mama die. There's no homeland for me to return to now. This is the end for me. So there's nowhere I want to go anymore. Lieutenant Angelo, Rubens, everyone who is so kind to me, they're all dead. And because of that, you want to die here too? I thought you said Italian women weren't weak. Live. Hey, Kinzo, what does it mean to live? You're the one who taught me, aren't you? Living is more than just breathing. I don't want to go back to Italy. Peace. You said that you were dead until you met me, but it's the same for me. I died in that submarine. My homeland fell, Mama died, even Papa died. I prayed that our sub would just sink to the bottom of the ocean. So when we reached this place, I was actually disappointed that we'd survived. Then, right after that, Lieutenant Angelo started asking whether anyone could speak English. When Kinzo met Beatrice, he finally forgot about dying. And when Beatrice met Kinzo, she also forgot about dying. Now that I've lost my homeland, my family, and my friends, my only wish is for you to kidnap me and take me away with you. Peace. But I know that's a wish that couldn't possibly come true. So at the very least, I want to be with you until the boat comes for us. I don't care about the pain in my chest. After all, when the boat comes and takes me away, I'll die. Beatrice spoke this, smiling softly. She did her best to hide the pain in her chest. Please, Kinzo, just for the few days until the boat comes. Kidnap me. That's a wish I can't grant. Looking apologetic, Kinzo lifted Beato up and gently sat her in the boat. Coward. So Japanese men are weak after all. You're right. I am a coward, so I can only grant you half of your wish. With the clunk, he placed it, wrapped in a jacket, in the boat. What do you mean? The part about until the boat comes for you. That's the part I can't grant. Huh? What do you mean? Kidnapping you. That part I will do. Kinzo. There has to be a doctor in Nijima. I'm wearing a Navy uniform. I should be able to pass myself off as a survivor of a boat carrying a BIP that was sunk by enemy ships. If the doctor happens to be the greedy sort, all the better. After all, I have right here the golden magic to make people do what I say. A witch from a distant country took my lifeless body and gave me a soul. A woman came to me with the gold and revived me with her magic. You are a witch, the Golden Witch. Yes, the Golden Witch. Even though I use the same recipes as everyone else, only my alchemy can turn pasta into a smoking black heap. Just like you, I'm nothing but a corpse allowed to live just as long as you're with me. If you go, I'll die straight away. I won't let you die. Really. No matter what. Take responsibility, okay? After all, you're the one kidnapping me. I like this story, for the most part. I see. So Kinzo-san told you that much. Then, wait, it was you? You're the Nijima doctor your grandfather took Beatrice to see? Why so shocked? He should have leapt to the mind ever since there was a Nijima doctor. All of a sudden, a soldier of the Navy appeared along with a foreign woman. Of course, I was astounded. And then he actually told me to treat her wounds confidentially, since their presence was a military secret. Was that the first time you met grandfather? Yes, that was when we first met. So you're the greedy doctor who followed orders for the sake of gold? That's a bit harsh. You suddenly brought in a foreign woman patient, explained to me that this was a military secret, promised that he'd pay the medical fees later, and handed me a gold ingot as collateral. I didn't want to get involved with any funny business. I was reluctant, to say the least. I see your point. But in the end, you did conceal Beatrice, didn't you? Okay, I think that's a good place to stop for the night. Again, a bit short, but I did do Umineko for an hour and a half. That's fine. I think that's fine, probably, to be honest. Let's go look at the system stuff. I think it probably adds them in here in the past. Maybe? Maybe not. Oh, good timing then. I guess it doesn't add them. No, you can't like click on Ginzo and see the youngkins or anything. Okay then.